run! Run! Get up!
Welcome back to the Movie Memo Recaps. Today, we are going to recap a 2008 movie titled Eden Lake. Please be advised that there will be spoilers ahead. In the first scene, we meet Jenny Greengrass, a nursery school teacher who works at a local daycare. Jenny gets picked up by her boyfriend, Steve Taylor, after finishing her classes on Friday, and the two promptly leave for a romantic adventure. They have planned a weekend away from a lonely lake in the English countryside, where Steve intends to propose. It's definitely a lengthy trip, and the sun sets before they arrive. As a result, they decide to stop at a motel and spend the night. The following day, they arrive at Eden Lake, a private neighborhood in the middle of the woods. The two leave their vehicle in the woods and continue their trek on foot. After a short hike, they make their way down to the lake. They come across a small, shy child called Adam, who is collecting insects in a jar. Jenny approaches him and attempts to start a conversation, but the youngster refuses to speak, addressing them as strangers. Soon later, the pair arrives to the tranquil Eden Lake, whose vista astounds them. Following that, they relax in the sun while snuggling with one another. However, their romantic moment is cut short when a bunch of noisy adolescent males and their dog arrive. They harass Adam and throw him out of the scene. Despite this, the couple chooses to stay behind and tolerate their loud music rather than causing trouble. Jenny shuts her eyes to snooze in the sun. However, the group's Rottweiler startles her awake. A little while later, Steve goes for a swim when the dog barks at Jenny again. Unable to bear it, he confronts the adolescents, urging them to lower their music volume and care for their dog. However, the lads refuse to cooperate. Instead, their leader Brett insults him and sends him out. Later on, one of the group members examines Jenny with binoculars. This makes her quite uncomfortable, so she covers herself. The raucous bunch eventually leaves, but one of them rudely exposes his dong as they pass. In the aftermath, Steve pitches the tent as Jenny gets wood for their nighttime stay. During this time, she hears rustling noises in the distance but chooses to ignore them. That night, while sitting around the campfire, Jenny hears the sounds coming from the woods. She informs her boyfriend about it, but he assures her that she shouldn't be concerned. The Rottweiler and his buddy Dong Boy have returned home. The next morning, Steve and Jenny awaken to discover their food supply infested by insects. Now that they have nothing to eat, they decide to go to a neighboring restaurant to satiate their hunger. However, as they drive away, they run over an empty bottle that the hooligans had left behind, causing their tire to flatten. Steve then finds a tool and fixes the tire before heading off. As they arrive in town, Steve notices the rowdy teenagers riding their bicycles. Furious, he decides to pursue them, but they enter a private property and hide. Following this, the pair goes to the diner, where Steve questions the waitress about the group of children. However, she dismisses his worry, arguing that they aren't her children. After their meal, Steve notices numerous bicycles splayed out on the front yard of a house and assumes it is the teens' home. He decides to go inside and report their behavior to their parents. As he approaches inside the premises, he notices the door is open and enters, asking if anybody is there. Brett's father, who is also the homeowner, comes shortly. Steve recognizes he has a strong temper, so he flees the home via a window, just avoiding capture. He quickly returns to the car, and the two drive back to the lake. Later, Steve chooses to go scuba diving while Jenny takes a nap on the beach. He returns and prepares to propose to her. But just as he's ready to do so, Jenny notices that their bag, which contains their phones, wallets, and vehicle keys, is stolen. They quickly rush to their parking space, only to realize that their vehicle has also vanished. With no other alternative, the two go towards the town. On their way, they narrowly miss getting hit by their own automobile, which Brett is carelessly driving. The sociopathic gang leader pauses briefly to smile before driving away. Following that, the pair continues walking, and as night sets, they discover the gang campfire in the woods. Steve then approaches them and demands the return of his possessions. However, Brett claims that he has no idea what he is talking about. At the same time, Steve's phone rings, and he moves forward to get it. This causes a confrontation between him and the group, and one of them takes out a knife. Steve gets to take the knife and ends up stabbing Brett's dog during the scuffle. Brett breaks down in tears as Steve grabs his vehicle keys and escapes with Jenny. The couple gets into their vehicle and drives away, but the group pursues them. Unfortunately, the car becomes stuck on a steep incline, and the group catches up. They then begin throwing stones at the car, smashing the headlights and windows. But just before they can break in, Steve manages to restart the automobile. They then accelerate into the woods, but because of the darkness and unclear driveway, the automobile collides with a pile of wood. Steve is stuck by a tree limb, so he instantly tells Jenny to flee and seek assistance. She flees, following his directions, and finds a place to hide for the night. Jenny warily returns to the car in the morning, only to discover that her lover has left. She then follows a blood trail till she discovers the group in a small clearing, much to her dismay. They've bound Steve to a rock with barbed wire and are torturing him mercilessly. Furthermore, Brett tells each squad member to stab him. Therefore, they are all involved. Paige, a female gang member, records the torture on her phone as a backup. When Jenny realizes they are ready to kill him, she connects with Steve's phone via Bluetooth on her GPS. She phones 999 for assistance, but Brett notices and concludes that she must be nearby. Jenny leaves, sensing the impending danger, but she is discovered by the gang members, who pursue her on their bicycles. Steve seizes this chance to free himself and flee despite the severe agony. During the pursuit, Jenny takes a log and uses it to smash the gang member's bike. She keeps going until she finds a modest mobile house. As she approaches, she finds a radiophone inside, but it is out her reach. Jenny rushes to grab it, but the teens arrive first. Jenny, with nowhere to hide, climbs to the roof and remains there until the group leaves. One of the gang members then runs to check on Steve, only to discover that he has fled. Meanwhile, Steve returns to his van to retrieve some first aid equipment. However, the auto alarm sounds as soon as he opens the trunk. The sound alarms the teenagers, who hurry towards him. Steve runs as quickly as he can, ultimately reuniting with his lover. Following this, the two continue their escape through the woods, eventually ending up in a little wooden cabin. When she notices that he is seriously bleeding, she attempts to administer first aid. During this, she discovers the engagement ring in his pocket, which brings her to tears. She cannot believe how inexpensive it appears. Soon later, the teen gang arrives on the scene. They rush into the cabin, only to discover bloodstains and remnants of the first aid equipment. It turns out that the pair was able to hide under the cottage, submerged in water. Jenny brings Steve out of the water and places him on the ground once the adolescents have left. He can't move because of the major wounds on his body. Jenny, seeing the gravity of the situation, decides to travel to town and seek assistance. Before leaving, she dons the engagement ring and promises to return for him. But as she flees, she unintentionally steps on a large spike, which enters her foot. This causes her excruciating agony, eliciting a loud cry. But, before the goons can reach her, Jenny manages to crawl to a secret place and remove the spike. As she lays down to gather her strength, Adam unexpectedly approaches her. She asks him to lead her out of the woods, but instead, he texts the gang members, exposing her position. Unfortunately, one of them instantly appears and knocks her unconscious from behind. Jenny awakens to find herself chained to a giant tree trunk alongside her boyfriend, who has already died. Brett then picks some wood and puts some gasoline on them, planning to burn them. His fellow gang members are visibly worried, but they lack the courage to challenge their boss. Brett urges Adam to carry out the act and offers to admit him into the gang as a reward. Tired of feeling excluded and bullied, the boy agrees. Steve's body is burnt first, as Paige records it. In a stroke of luck, the rope attached to Jenny's body gradually burns through, allowing her to break free and flee. Infuriated, Brett pours gasoline on Adam and uses him as bait to lure her back. But Jenny ignores his warning, and the merciless boss burns the youngster alive. Jenny continues to run and soon discovers a trail map, which she uses to find her way out. When she hears the teenagers approaching, she hurriedly hides in a dirty garbage can to avoid arrest. After they go, she leaves the bin and arms herself with a glass shard. She soon notices a gang member called Cooper in a mirror who appears to be eager to aid her. Jenny, however, clearly sees him as a threat and stabs him with her weapon. She immediately regrets her actions, but she has no choice but to watch him die. Despite her overwhelming remorse, she continues to look for a way out. That night, the rest of the group discovers Cooper's dead body. At this time, a gang member named Harry loses control and blames Brett for everything. He even calls the cops, but Brett, who isn't ready to be arrested, beats him to death. Paige flees after witnessing this, apparently afraid of his aggressive conduct. In the meantime, Jenny makes it to the road and flags down a vehicle. She jumps in and urgently orders the driver to take her to town, but he says he's hunting for his brother, who is also in the forest. Jenny quickly realizes that his brother is one of the gang members. As a consequence, when the driver exits to summon his brother, she snatches the van and escapes the scene. In a moment of spiteful wrath, she runs over Paige without regret. Jenny eventually makes it to town, but she's too weak to drive. As a result, she collides into a house's front garden. Jenny regains consciousness in the midst of a party and sees a lady comforting her, but to her dismay, she observes some wall photos and knows she is in Brett's house. Extremely low. The rest of the attendees are the parents of the gang members. In a moment of terror, she requests to be led to the restroom, where she takes a razor blade for self-defense. By this moment, Brett's father has noticed the smashed van and recognized it as belonging to his younger son. This causes a disturbance, and Brett's father kicks the door open. Jenny finds Brett outdoors, and he persuades the other parents that she and Steve are to blame for their children's deaths. Jenny begs them to contact the police, but they all want to hold her accountable for what occurred. They taught these youngsters all they know, after all. It turns out that the gang members' parents are just as crazy and homicidal as their children, and they knew it, so they protected them from punishment. Jenny is then carried outside by his parents, while Brett goes into his room and closes the door to prevent her screaming. He removes the footage of the gang's misdeeds from Paige's phone, puts on Steve's sunglasses, and looks blankly into a mirror. And the movie ends. Thank you for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.